Alright, we got a cracked iPhone XS Max screen, and I'm going to show you guys how to fix it. This is a lot simpler to me than the other iPhones, but as you can tell, the phone functions. It's just got a pretty good crack that goes across, and in certain places, when you touch it, it's causing a little issues here and there. Nothing crazy, but it does bother you every now and then. So the first thing you always want to do is make sure your phone is powered off. And I'm going to go through a few of the tools. This is an iSesamo tool. These are really cool. It's just a pry tool, really, but great tool. This is a pentalobe screwdriver. You must have this to open the phone, and that goes for all iPhones. This is a Y screwdriver. On this XS Max, it's a must-have. I'll leave a link in the description for all these tools as well. Most times you can buy like a kit that comes with all these screwdrivers, and you don't got to buy them individually. And then here is a Phillips screwdriver, some anti-static tweezers. It's important that they're anti-static. You don't have to use tweezers. You can use that iSesamo tool as well. And I'll kind of go over that here in a minute. But after we've powered off the phone, you're going to go to the bottom of the phone, and there's two pentalobe screws. And like I said, these are the same on every single iPhone. So you got to make sure you have this screwdriver, and you're going to want to unscrew these two screws and make sure that you lay them kind of out where you know where you put them, because if you lose them, they are not fun to find. Once you do that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at the screen we bought, actually, to make sure that we got the right one before we get too far into this repair. And I'll leave a link in the description where I got this screen as well. It's a good screen. I like these screens a lot. Good company to get these screens from. So I'm just kind of looking at it, seeing what cables there are. There's really only those two, and they're on this bottom right hand side. So I kind of know, more towards the middle really, that when I go around the edges, just to be careful. And if you do damage the cables, it's okay. I mean, you're replacing this LCD anyway, so it's not a big deal, but just something to be mindful of. So you can take a heat gun or a hairdryer if you want to and kind of go around the edges just to loosen up the glue, but most of the times on the phones, it's really not necessary. But this pry tool works pretty awesome. I usually start at the bottom, or if you've broke your phone and there's a little gap, start right there. And like I said, if this is a phone that's never been repaired before, it's probably on there pretty good. So you're going to want to, when you get your pry tool in there, you're going to want to kind of push up on it. And you're finally going to start making a little headroom. And like I said, on this side right here is where those cables are. So I'm still prying. I'm just being a little bit mindful that's where those cables are. Since those cables are on that side, you want to open it left to right if you're looking at the phone dead on, just like a book. And you want to hold this up about 90 degrees. Don't go any further than that. There's a cable on the left side right there, and it will tear if you pull that too far. You want to grab your Y screwdriver now. They love to mix these screws up. And there's going to be a shield right here that you're going to want to remove with this Y screwdriver. And there's 3 screws. And it should just slide right off. And I went ahead and disconnected these 2 cables. I was thinking that was the battery, that one right there in the middle. So I like to disconnect the battery first. But after looking at it, I don't know if that was a battery or not. I'm still messing with it to see. And then after you do that, there's going to be 4 screws on this one. And be very careful when you're taking these screws off that you're lining them up the way you're taking them out, because that screw right there in the middle is a very long screw. And if you put it in one of these other holes, you're just going to cause damage. So make sure that when you're taking these screws out, you're laying them down in a certain order. So like I'll lay them down, and then I'll put this shield next to it so I can tell like which screw goes with what. I'm not putting them just in a little pile. Now we want to disconnect this camera. And it's the second one right here, and it's kind of behind the battery. So when you pull on it, you got to pull behind the battery. And you'll kind of get more of it when you start pulling on it. But I started looking at this a little bit deeper, and I can tell that right here, that right there, that's the battery. So that's the one you want to disconnect as soon as you can. Now I'm just taking a look at this top piece, and there's 3 screws One on the, I got those two, and then there's one over here on this left side. It's a little bitty tiny screw, and these are all Y screwdrivers. And like I said, I'll leave a link in the description. And then right here on this left side, you can barely see it. It's a very tiny little screw, but it is a Y screwdriver as well. And like I said, make sure you lay these out exactly the way you're taking them out. It'll make it a lot easier when we're putting this back. So this just kind of folds down. This is something to be very careful of. Don't pull too hard on it or anything like that. If you see any kind of damage on it, you know, stay away from that, because this is your Face ID and it can jack things up. So I'm getting underneath this middle part right here, and if you can get underneath that and it comes out just like that, if you can pull that out just like that, it comes out super simple. Not a lot of tugging or anything like that, but you want to make sure you don't bend any of those cables, you don't cut any of those cables in any way. But it's that top piece. If you can get that piece out, the rest of this whole sensor will just fall out. You just got to work on that top piece and make sure you're getting behind it and not cutting into it. And now I'm going to grab the new screen, and we're just going to do basically everything in opposite order. And you can kind of see how big that top piece is. It kind of fits. It's a little blurry, sorry. It kind of fits right into that little part right there. So when you're taking it out, that's the top piece you got to remove. So just don't cut into it too deep and halfway and think that you're done, because you could damage that, and then you have to buy a new one of those and you'll no longer have Face ID. So just be very, very careful with the top part. You don't want to damage that cable in any way. But once it's even, once it's level, and you feel good about it, we're going to start taking those 3 screws, those Y screws that we removed, we're going to start putting them back. And if you don't have magnetized screwdrivers, this is a must. You can buy a little magnetizer from AutoZone for like $3. It works really well. I have a video on it, and you want to make sure your screwdriver is magnetized. It helps so much. And most of the screwdrivers you get in these kits, I'll leave a link in the description, they're all magnetized. But it's always good to have a little magnetizer with you, and I have a video on that. I'll leave a link in the description, but it's super easy to magnetize these screwdrivers. It just makes it a lot easier when you're putting these little bitty tiny screws in these holes, especially if they pop up. I got this microfiber cloth. It catches these screws like really good if they kind of pop or anything. But if you're doing this on carpet and you drop one of these screws on the carpet, you might as well kiss it goodbye. These screws are like almost impossible to find. Sometimes I'll drop them on hardwood floor or tile and I can't find them. So if you drop it in carpet, good luck. So just be mindful of where you're trying to do this at, and make sure that if a screw does fall, you should be able to get it. But that's really it for the top part. I mean, you just screw those in. Like I said, this is actually a pretty simple repair. Just make sure you take your time, especially on that top cable that we just removed, because if you damage anything up there, like I said, your Face ID may no longer work. And now we're just going to put everything back. Remember, on this one, you got to kind of go underneath the battery, kind of, and put this one in. But if you can snap it down, you can kind of fit it between the battery and the other connections. And you'll kind of see what I mean when you do it yourself. It's really not as hard as to do as it is to describe. And all I'm doing now is I'm just putting down all the connections. I want to make sure before we put those plates on that everything's connected down and this phone is working. So this is just kind of like a test, really. We're going to turn this baby on and just kind of mess with it. Sometimes you know the passcodes of these phones, sometimes you don't. So if you don't, you can just press like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You can press that emergency at the bottom and just make sure that everything works. There's some lines right now that are going through the phone, but that's just from the camera that I'm recording on. Those are not really on the phone. But like on that phone, I didn't know the passcode, so I'm just kind of went to emergency, pressed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You just want to make sure that it's, when you press 1, it reads 1. When you press 2, it reads 2, and so on. So everything looks good, so I'm going to go ahead and put this shield back. There's 4 screws on this one. Like I said, make sure that when you're putting these back, you're putting this exact same screw that you pulled out in the exact same hole. If you need to take a piece of paper and like make a little diagram, I did that at first. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. It'll save you big time. I've had phones come in where they put a long screw in a short hole and damaged the phone. So these screws are made by Apple in different sizes for a reason. So make sure you're putting the right screw in the right hole. You can damage components behind it. You can damage the phone. And sometimes you put a long screw in a short hole and the screw sticks out and it can actually damage the screen. So just be mindful, be careful. Most importantly, I've sped this video up, but take your time, go slow. This phone repair is not hard. You don't have to have a lot of skill to do it. You need the right tools. That's the main thing. You just need the right tools, really, and patience. If you have patience, right tools, like I said, I'll leave a link in the description. This phone repair is easy. Anybody can do it. You just got to make sure not to pull on anything, not to tug on anything. Just kind of let it do its thing. And as you can see at the top right there, there's like these little hooks on this iPhone XS Max. And you really need to kind of push down at the top and like push towards the top of the phone. Because you'll see right here when I start trying to push it in, I can tell here at the bottom that it's just not going in right. And I can tell at the very top there's still a little bit of a tiny gap. So those little connectors we just saw a minute ago, they're not connecting at the top just right. So I'm going to have to kind of pry this open again, and you'll see here in just a second. I pry this open, and I pull back on the phone at the bottom, and then I push with my hand at the bottom of the phone, some pressure towards the very top, and this time it goes in really, really good. So just make sure when you're putting this in, you put pressure at the bottom towards the top of the phone, and it'll just slide right in those little connections. And I just look around the sides to make sure everything looks level, and I'm happy with it. Everything looks good. We're going to go ahead and put in the 2 bottom pentalobe screws. And that's it, guys. I mean, it is not a hard repair to do. And it's like I said, all you got to need is the right tools. And just take your time. Don't rush anything. If you have any questions or concerns or anything, just message me. I answer most of the time. Thanks, guys.